Fire weather developing in the forecast with a red flag warning going into effect. I'm ABC 10 Chief Meteorologist Monica Woods breaking down some of the critical fire weather we're going to start to see in the coming days. We had the Bonanza fire developing in El Dorado County. It started on June 17th. It managed to make it through about 181 acres. It's 15% contained, but we can see from the images tough terrain on that firefight. We're starting to get into the time of year where the fuel continues to dry out. Tough terrain and a lot of dry fuel. It's a situation that will continue to be a problem as we dig deeper into the dry season. Looking at our fire season so far. Now, again, we got a big start in January because of the fires in Southern California. So we're now up to almost 90,000 acres burned, ahead of that 5-year average of 17,000 plus acres. In terms of the sheer amount of fires, pretty close to our 5-year average and a little ahead of where we were last year at this point. As far as our elevated fire weather moving forward, now Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's going to be in the minor range for the northern and central part of the Sacramento Valley, with wind gusts up to about 35 miles per hour and fairly low humidity. But once we dig into that Saturday forecast, we get into the moderate range for the lower elevations below 3,000 feet, with wind gusts up to about 30 miles per hour. Humidity comes down somewhat as well. During that time frame, from Wednesday through Saturday, we will have periodic bumps of higher fire danger, and we'll go over that here in just a moment. You can see the critical fire potential starting to develop with moderately dry conditions throughout much of the lower elevations, as well as through parts of the foothills. And then once we head through the central part of the Sierra, we get a bit more of a bump into that higher wind category for the potential for significant fires. And that's really where we start to see some of the potential for higher fire growth. Our wind advisory will be in effect for Friday throughout the Tahoe Basin, all the way up and down the Sierra Spine, and then east of the crest. We're going to add another element of fire danger to this, and that's where that red flag warning comes into effect. That starts up Thursday afternoon, takes us all the way until midnight on Saturday. So again, starting to head into the time of year where we head into that peak fire season because of the available fuel and now the potential for the fire weather conditions developing as well. Keep it on ABC 10 Plus for the latest on any fire development as well as weather conditions. We've got extended forecasts just like this, as well as weather explainers and weather and climate specials. That's on ABC 10 Plus. Download it wherever you stream for free on TV. Looking at the heat risk, this is kind of setting the stage for additional drawing of all that fuel. So we've got the warmth building into the forecast with temperatures close to 100 up and down the valley, putting us in the moderate heat risk category. This is going to affect most people who are sensitive to heat, especially those that don't have adequate access to cooling. How many days has it been since we've been above 100 degrees? It's been 17. We have to go all the way back to May 31st when we saw a temperature of 102. But since then, kind of flirting around the 100 mark, but within about 5 degrees or so. We really haven't seen a whole lot of explosive heat here in June. We've seen 5 days below average, 4 at or close to normal, and then 8 above average. But again, not a whole lot of 100s since the end of May. Temperature trend has been fairly favorable over the past couple of days. It's just recently that we've seen this brief bump up in temperatures, and it really doesn't last all that long. What's going to happen is we lose that high pressure ridge. That's the sinking, warming air that we so often talk about when we hit those stretches of 100. But it's not going to be around for long. In fact, breezy conditions develop, cooler conditions as well, as this low starts to push its way southward here, giving us access to that cool air, but also driving in some pretty significant winds throughout Northern California, elevating, again, the fire danger. So let's take it step by step here. On Wednesday, we have those lighter winds, but these really start to accelerate, especially throughout the Sierra. During Thursday afternoon, they're up to about 40 miles per hour, but Friday, they go up to almost 60 miles per hour. They'll back off a little bit on Saturday, but again, we're going to have to continue to watch those winds all the way into the beginning of the weekend with that wind advisory in effect through Friday at 11 p.m. So most of Friday, we'll be talking about that higher fire danger with, for some areas, that red flag warning in effect. effect. You have to meet certain criteria to get into that red flag warning zone, but indeed that is going to be for the higher elevations. We started off yesterday with a fire weather watch. Now that conditions are going to be imminent and soon occurring, we get into the red flag warning. Not quite at that particularly dangerous red flag warning condition, and it doesn't really look like we're going to get into that, but that is certainly something that we'll be watching for any sort of elevated risk. One thing that we continue to talk about is fire defense. Now, for a certain property, you want to have at least 100 feet from your structure. Some folks are even saying go 200 feet. Just get it as far away as possible. The other thing is when they do fuel management in the especially the dense brush and some of the forests, grasses, shrubs, and trees can be a ladder to spread fire. So look at this little characterization here. You can see that we've got the brush right here, and right next to it, if you have a tree that has another available spot to land one of those flames, it just moves right up the tree. Whereas if you get proper vertical clearance, then it's a little harder to get things laddering and spreading. Yesterday, we saw some of that building in that Bonanza fire, but you want to make sure that it's about 3 times the height of the lowest object. So wherever this is, you want to make sure that you have 3 times that height. So let's say this is 5 feet. You want to give 15 feet clearance to make sure that you don't have any of that laddering going on. So if you have some of that on your property, that's just another thing to keep in mind. Preventing a spark, easiest way to stop a fire from happening. Keep vehicles off of dry grass. Watch for dragging vehicle parts. Mow lawns, not dry grass or weeds. So if you are doing some of that clearing in your space, make sure that you are doing it in the most safe way possible, not in dry grass. You don't want to be mowing all that down. And properly dispose of cigarettes and matches. Definitely don't want to start a fire like that. Have those wildfire emergency items on hand. Survival needs, make sure you fill up or charge your car and your phone. Have food and water for at least 3 days. Have those important documents ready to go in that go bag. And then always remember your pets. You want the ID tag, food, a carrier, leash, I should say, medications, and those medical records. Also sign up for emergency notifications. Want to do this beforehand, not while an emergency is in place. So that can be making sure you have television and radio access, wireless local emergency alerts. Sign up for social media and websites that will be alerting you to any sort of evacuation warning. Have a NOAA weather radio on hand, and make sure your family and friends are aware of where you will be evacuating to or where you plan to go. Is it a neighbor? Is it a friend? Is it somewhere out of town that you're going to stay with somebody just to get out of harm's way? And make sure, again, you sign up before the weather hazard actually is occurring. As far as what we're expecting, above average temperatures for our Wednesday, setting the stage again for additional warming and lowering that humidity under that ridge of high pressure. Here comes that low, though. Now we're going to add in the wind. That's another component of the critical fire weather conditions that will be developing. North of us, we're going to see some showery weather, but unfortunately, we don't tap into much of that moisture. Instead, we just get the dry conditions, which will be elevating the fire concerns into our Friday and Saturday. Friday is the summer solstice. June 20th is when it happens this year. It can happen right around June 20th. Several years it happens on June 21st, but that's when the center of the sun's rays are directly above the Tropic of Cancer. We get more daylight in the northern hemisphere, less daylight in the summer hemisphere. And this is usually the point as well where we start to really talk about significant warming in the forecast. The hottest that we've had since 1980. I wasn't going to go all the way back to the 1800s because since it happens on June 20th or 21st, had to do a little bit more investigation on when indeed the summer solstice happened since 1980. So the hottest that we've had, June 21st, that was just 3 years ago when we had 105 degrees, but 20 years prior to that, we had the coldest start to summer at 76 degrees. So we really run the range here of what we typically see. Again, I talked about additional sunlight and daylight that comes in, our seasonal changes, as you can see. On June 20th, that sunrise is at 5:42 with that sunset not until 8:34. But fast forward into the autumnal equinox. This year it happens on September 22nd. That sunrise won't happen until just before 7 a.m. and our sunset happens right around 7 p.m. So if you enjoy a whole lot of daylight, then June 20th is something you should look forward to. 8 to 14 day climate outlook. We are going to stay in that slightly cooler range, especially along the coast. As far as the likely weather, it is well east of us here, so we're not going to see a whole lot of access to any rain coming in. Instead, for the next 24 hours, it's all about the heat and then the much cooler weather ahead, but breezy again with elevated fire danger. Highs in the 70s for our Thursday forecast. Last full day of spring there for the higher elevation. 60s along the coast, and you can see how we're drawing in some of that cooler air, bringing us down into the 80s for many places for our Thursday forecast. We'll be in the low 90s where we have less access to that breeze coming in. So Delta influenced areas, say Elk Grove, Sacramento, Davis, even Galt and Lodi. We're going to cool things down into the 80s as we head north and south of that, though. Patterson, Turlock, Modesto, Yuba City, even Colusa, we're still sitting in the 90s. Roseville still in the 90s as well. I'll look at our regional forecast, and we are going to see quite a bit of cooling come in for the first weekend of summer. So we get that brief little bump in temperatures on Wednesday. We bring down temperatures for the rest of the forecast here into the weekend. We'll start to warm again in our extended forecast. As you'll see, a little cooler for Friday for that first day of summer. And then we start to warm things up gradually towards the end of the weekend, finally getting back into the 90s as we head towards the first full week of summer.